I have a problem with deception. I know it's kind of obvious, right? Nobody likes lies. But I think that my issue stems from a deeper seated hatred for lies than just being lied to and the disrespect. You know, a lot of times people are angry when someone lies to them because, oh, they disrespected me and I deserve the truth and blah, 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 right? And yeah, that's kind of true. I get it. But my hatred for lies, for deception, not just a lie, because sometimes people lie using the truth, and that's pretty horrific too. They paint pictures, they use the paintbrush of truth to create an image that is absolutely a lie. And so that's still deception. It's actually a more sinister form of deception. So, where does my hatred of deception come from? And it goes to this verse, and I'm going to read it right now. uh, John 14:6. And Jesus says, well, let me actually get that verse up here because I have something else up here. 14:6 says, Jesus saith unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. So I really had a problem with lies because I have witnessed with my eyes, not just with my experience, that a lie, a deception separates people from God. If Jesus, Yeshua, if God is truth, and He is, then a lie separates you from God. That's where my rage comes from, my anger towards this. Not towards the person doing it, but towards the actual lie itself. I hate deception because I love the Father. I love Yeshua. I don't want a lie that's going to defile me, that's going to, what's the word? Keep me from being closer to Him because it separates us from Him. It actually drives a wedge between us and God. And in some ministry work that I've done, I have actually seen the spiritual aspects of believing a lie and how it affects the body, the mind, and the spirit. And that the body eventually will start manifesting issues as this lie pervades the life of the believer. And I mean believer of the lie, not Christian necessarily. I mean, this applies to everybody when you believe a lie. It causes damage, right? And this is why, oh, if I, forgive me, my dogs. Sorry about that. So when we believe a lie, we are accepting the world and rejecting God by default, even if we don't mean to, even if we don't see any harm in it. Why would we not believe somebody? And that's what I want to talk about next, is this protocol for protecting yourself from this very simple and honest mistake. It's not that you meant to believe a lie. If it's coming from someone you trust, right? Why wouldn't you believe it? And yet we do all the time. So I'm going to tell a little story about myself and about some of the things that I've endured as a witness. And I mean witness not in the sense of witnessing for God, but witnessing against the evils being done under the sun. Because how do we reclaim the world and what's under the sun but by bringing the truth into it, right? So I think this is very important, to be a witness of injustice right? And when we see it, to speak. So for me, my life has been a series of speaking the truth and not being believed. And this led me to feel like no one would ever believe me. This is what the devil is saying to me in the back of my mind, saying, just whispering behind me, no one's going to believe you. Don't even bother. They're going to hate you for what you have to say. And it's true. Like, that's true. Again, using the truth as a weapon against God's children is travesty. Anyway, so I still spoke, and like clockwork, would not be believed. And we use some examples. My father, who I love, he's not perfect. Well, he's passed away now, but we had our differences. But when I finally told him about some of the abuse that I endured, I was a teenager at the time, he didn't believe me. And so I said, fine, go believe Tina, my sister. And they believed her, right? Got raped in college. And my sister said, you have to say something or he'll do it again, blah, blah, blah. I did. Judge believed me, but he got away with it. And that hurt. No one believed me, or at least some of the people close to me believed me, but even those closest didn't until later, years later, when he did something, and thankfully it was thwarted by the grace of God, but then people believed, right? And in the Torah, it says that an allegation needs to have two witnesses. Okay. And I was speaking to someone last Shabbat, I think it was Shabbat, I don't remember, it was last week sometime, maybe it was Sunday morning. I guess that's still this week, but you know what I mean. And I was explaining that you have to still go first. Somebody has to speak first. The witness has to come first. And that first witness, probably not going to be believed, guys. And to be honest, they shouldn't be. Let me explain. I was so upset for people not believing me, but they shouldn't believe me. I'm glad they don't, because if I were lying and they believe me, it would separate them from God. Good, don't believe me. The problem is they'll believe a liar and not me, and that does cut. That does hurt. Like, why, if you know that I love the truth as much as I do you not believe me? So they can't say that I'm dishonest, so instead they paint this picture that I'm crazy, that it's not justified. Like, all of these things. It's a travesty, but it happens. And it was very hurtful to me. But as I'm talking to this woman and telling her that, the first witness never believed. And as this week has unfolded and other things that have been revealed, it's important that we recognize that our testimony will probably not be believed, but do it anyway, even if it takes years, right? If you are speaking the truth, do not be afraid to speak it, even if you're hated for it, because it has to happen for there to be two, right? So I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, because this is really upsetting to me. The devil has our playbook, guys. He knows. He has the Bible. He knows what Christians have been taught. Now, I don't know about if everyone is like into sports or whatever, but could you imagine allowing the other team to know how you operate? What do you think they would do? They would train for it. They would anticipate your moves. This is what the devil has done. And he has people in our government, in our schools, in our churches, everywhere that there is a position of authority and power. Why? Because then he can use those people to thwart the design, the playbook of God's people. So here's this condition. You need to have 2 witnesses, right? So what their lawyers do, and I'm saying the devil's lawyers, and I say lawyers because they know the law, they make sure that there can't be 2 witnesses. This is what they do. And they do this in multiple ways, right? The first is simply silencing the witness, make them feel like they cannot speak. I know, because it's been done to me. She's crazy, right? Anytime I say anything, especially the truth, she's crazy. So people know my integrity, they know my love for the truth, so they can't say I'm a liar. Well, some of them do, but most of the time it's that she's crazy because they can't question my integrity. So they use my past and, oh, she's just broken, she's this and whatever. Typical gaslighting. Another way they silence people is by making sure that they're alone, right? When these things happen. There are cults and religious organizations and even private organizations, just any kind of anywhere that they will get somebody alone and do horrible things to them. But there's not 2 witnesses. You have no right to speak. There isn't another witness to corroborate your story. So you're bad for even saying it because there has to be 2. And then they play on the shame, again, silencing a witness. But here's a third way. They get rid of them. Now you see this in countries where there's a lot of corruption, where they kill the witness. But in America, I think that probably does happen, but maybe to a lesser degree. Instead, they cancel them, they exclude them, they make them leave, right? And they do this multiple ways, making them crazy, sabotaging them, or making things so awful for them that they leave, right? So when they're gone, then there can't be another witness. There can't be another witness, right? This is how the devil uses this law. This is meant to protect us because, okay, it's good that you don't believe the first witness. Why? Because we don't want to believe something that's not true, right? So you need to do your due diligence and investigate an allegation. Like this is important. I say this all the time because I see something and I testify, but maybe I don't have all the information. And even if I am speaking the truth, it may not be the entirety of the truth, right? I could witness somebody shoot someone in the face. That's pretty severe. But if I have a second witness that may have seen more of the story, right? That person shot them because they were holding someone hostage or whatever, right? I'm talking more of legal terms, okay, of what you would see in a criminal investigation by today's standards. We should have 2. So I don't need to be hurt by that, right? I don't need to be hurt by that. And that gave me a lot of peace, and I was grateful for that because, well, it's painful when the people you love don't believe your testimony. It is. I don't care who you are, that hurts because they're judging you, that you're a liar or that you're crazy, right? That's painful. It's going to be painful, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. So how do we protect ourselves from this? The devil knows how we're going to operate. He knows how to silence the witnesses. And there's, I could speak so much on this topic of scapegoating and making them look crazy or making them into the villain. This is a common tactic as well, so that no one listens. That's how they silence them. But Jesus tells us what to do. And I really want to spend some time talking about this because I really believe that people, if they would do this, all of these things would be resolved. All of them. And they don't. So we're going to talk about that. And I'm going to pull up the verse. So I'm going to pause this right now. Okay, so I'm going to start with Matthew 18:15. Moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. If he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. But if he will not hear thee, then take with thee 1 or 2 more, that in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established. And if he shall neglect to hear them, tell it unto the church. But if he neglect to hear the church, let him be unto thee as an heathen man and a publican. Verily I say unto you, whatsoever ye shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever ye shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Again I say unto you, that if 2 of you shall agree on earth as touching anything that they shall ask, it shall be done for them of my Father which is in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them. And it goes on about forgiveness. Now, there's a lot here. I could spend a lot of time on each of them, especially the name. So many people speak as if they're speaking in the name of the Lord, but they do not know his name. I want to spend a whole lot of time on that, but for the sake of this recording, I will stick to this. So Yeshua is telling us how to correct this situation. And in verse 15, he says, if thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. Right? He doesn't say, if he trespasses against you and you don't forgive him, then go to him. Because I know a lot of people will say, well, that's between you and God. Or, well, I already forgave him, so I'm not even going to worry about it. That's not what he says here. He says, if they trespass, go to them. Why? Because you are a witness, a true and faithful witness to their trespass, right? If somebody else says, hey, I saw how you treated so-and-so, and then comes to you, that's not the same. You are a true witness. You experienced the fault yourself, and it impacted you, right? If it didn't impact you, it wouldn't be a trespass, right? And when you recognize that there's a sin or a trespass against you, you have to recognize that in order to even forgive it. So, right? Because if you go, oh, that didn't hurt my feelings, then you're lying. Again, this goes back to being honest and loving the truth. So when you go to that person one-on-one and speak to them, you're giving them an opportunity to, 1, see what they've done, and 2, for you to understand what they did. Because maybe, I'm going to say, a lot of the time, we have no reason to be offended. It might not even be what we think, right? But sometimes we do. And I'm going to share a little story. I did something to somebody. It wasn't sinful or against the law, but it upset them, right? And part of that was something they were dealing with internally too. But when we came together and spoke, and I give her kudos for her courage in speaking this to me, but I also sensed something was wrong, and I was open to the conversation because I love her. We both grew from that, and that's edification, right? That's bringing each other up. And this is what Yeshua is saying. We can do that if we just aren't too proud to hear somebody, because I'm going to tell you, 90% of the time when I go to somebody, no, probably more than that, and tell them something that they did that hurt me, I'm met with anger and judgment and gaslighting and muddying the water and all of that. And I have to really take a step back and go and not react to being manipulated. And that's hard. And I do it, but sometimes it doesn't go well. I just had an argument with someone yesterday, and I'm glad that I didn't let the sun set on my anger. I went straight to them and told them, this is how this makes me feel, and this has been happening, blah, blah, blah. And they did. They got angry with me and called me ungrateful and all of these things. And none of which was true. We talked. Eventually we got past it. And I was justified. And their feelings were heard. And their limitations were heard as well. And I think we're better for it. But if I hadn't done it, it would have bred resentment and bitterness, right? Because it would fester and it would continue to happen. And they didn't even realize, they didn't understand that their actions were affecting me. And I hope that it makes it better. And maybe it won't, maybe whatever. But I did my part, right? So then Jesus tells us what to do next. What happens when that person won't hear you? What if they're in a position of power over you? What if they're doing something like they're your teacher in the school and they're treating you unfairly and you go to them and say, hey, this wasn't right the way you treated me, and they're in the position of power. And I really want to speak to this because this is how the devil uses this. When someone is in a position of power over you or authority over you, he uses this so to silence you, so that he can continue to oppress. Now, these people that are doing that, they're just his tools. I don't hate them. I hate him, right? I hate the devil. I hate the evil that is done under the sun. So, but to reclaim that, to reclaim what is under the sun, to reclaim the truth, we have to reclaim the truth and to banish the lies. So this is how we do this. So you bring a witness, and this is my fatal flaw. And I don't always bring a witness because I want to protect that person. I want to shield them from other people seeing what they're doing. So I hide it. And I try to petition them repeatedly, one-on-one. That's a sin on me. I shouldn't do that. And I have to be better. But the devil will do that. He'll make sure that his person has a witness when you come before them. And so I thought about this too. When you don't bring a witness, you leave yourself open to being manipulated, to being gaslit, to being all of these things when there's a position of power. When they're in a position of power, it's a little different when you're equals. So when you bring a witness and you're saying, this is what you've done to me, this is how it hurt me, and that person says, well, that's your fault, and there's this and there's that, and they start to attack you because they're angry, they're defensive, they're hurting themselves. They don't want to acknowledge the truth of the situation because that would be to acknowledge their wrongdoing, and their pride gets in the way. And this is normal. Expect it. Jesus knew it was going to happen. He knew it was going to happen. That's why I told you to do it. But when you have somebody else there to say, whoa, 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 why are you gaslighting her or him? Why are you not hearing what she's having to say? That's not what she said. And then you have somebody there to witness their behavior towards you, right? Because it's going to happen. And if they have their witnesses, they'll say, well, oh, well, I'll have my nurse come in if it's a doctor. Right? Well, that's not your witness. That's their witness. That's their protection, not your protection. You bring your own witness. And I had a situation with this. I spoke to another believer, and I had told her, I was like, I don't want to go and have this conversation because they always have their too, but I'm always there alone. And then they well, I didn't say they gaslight me, but that's what happened in my heart. I knew what would happen. And then I would feel, because they have knowledge over you and power over you, they can really manipulate the situation. It's very, very bad. And a lot of times they don't realize they're doing it. They just want to protect themselves. And that's human nature. You should expect that. Because we're living in the truth here, not delusion. When you delude yourself and expect someone to behave righteously, you're setting yourself up. Because they're probably not going to, right? I will hope they will. But there's a good chance they're not gonna. So just be prepared for that. Don't decide good or bad what they're gonna do. Give them a chance, but If we follow the protocol Jesus set out, we'll be okay. So you bring somebody with you. It's not just to see what they're doing, but it's to protect you. It's to keep the topic on the topic, because this muddying the water, then the person who's been wronged, leaves feeling like they were the one who did it. No, 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 no. That is not the point, because it also keeps that person acting in a sinful way. They don't even recognize that they're hurting people. So once you have brought this before whoever with two witnesses, they don't listen to you. Don't just run away, right? This is the critical point. And I think this is what a lot of people, they stop here. Okay. Okay, so it says, but if he will not hear thee, this is verse 16, then take with thee one or two more, that in the mouth of two or three witnesses every word may be established. Then in verse 17 it says, and if he shall neglect to hear them, tell it unto the church. But if he neglect to hear the church, let him be unto thee as an heathen man and a publican. Okay, now here you can see that these are other witnesses that have seen the same thing. Okay, I'm not really talking about that, but you still need to bring a witness, right? Because if you don't, right, then it never gets out there. And if they push you aside, which oftentimes they do, there won't be that first witness, even if it takes years, right? So that in the mouth of two or three witnesses every word may be established, right? So then they see, okay, so let's say we go and we talk, and I bring a witness for me, and they still deny, even though that other witness sees the gaslighting, sees all of these other things, right? They can at least attest to that. The next step at that point is to bring it before the congregation. But you know what they do? The political party may not let you bring it before whoever, right? The school boards, the school may just shut you down. You can't get an audience with them, right? I think it was Jeremiah where he couldn't come before the king, right? And they just tore up his testimony. So you might not be able to get an audience, because then they could say, well, like, we didn't actually have this conversation. They didn't do anything wrong because it didn't come before the congregation, didn't come before the group of people, right? Whatever it is. Now, in this setting, it was the congregation, but I believe it can be applied to a lot of different things. And it should be. Because at that point, like for me, in the rape hearing that I had, I brought it before the judge. I got my protection order. But there wasn't enough evidence, right? But it was made known that I made this allegation. And people chose to believe me, chose not to believe me. Didn't matter. And I did that by myself too. I didn't have anyone to stand beside me except the judge, and I appreciated that. I had no lawyer. But we have to make it known, right? And if they don't bring it before everybody else, okay, so let's say somebody wronged you and you brought it before whatever the powers that be. Like there's often a board, ombudsman, I think in some situations, like if you're dealing with insurance, you can say, I'm gonna call the insurance commissioner. You can go above them once you follow this protocol. You go to them, no resolution. You bring a witness, no resolution. You go to the next up. If they don't believe that, if your testimony isn't believed, that's okay, because you brought it forward and there wasn't enough evidence to convict, and there shouldn't be. If it's only one person, there really shouldn't be. His word against their word. If there's no other evidence, how can you really do that, right? Because it's so easy for people to lie, and they do it all the time. I hate it. I hate all the lies. But if you do, they won't be able to do it again. If we follow this, they won't be able to do it again. So let's look at what happens right before this, okay? So Like I said, the devil knows the playbook, right? If you stop fighting and you stop and you just submit to the evils done in the world and don't fight according to God's word, His scripture, yeah, they're going to keep doing it. So the next person is going to get hurt too. The cycle has to stop with you. And when you stop that, like you're the first witness. I know it sucks, but what they will do is discredit you. It's going to happen, right? If they're really convicted in whatever they're doing, this is probably going to happen. They will try to separate you. They'll kick you out of the club, right? You're no longer allowed to come to the board meeting at town hall, right? Or your fellowship, the elders will kick you out so that you really can't bring it before the congregation, especially if it's an allegation against leadership. And that's really what I'm talking about today, because of the abuses done under the sun by the political leaders, the church leaders, the school leaders, everybody who has power and authority over our children and over the weak of society, even doctors. They have all this power. This is how you bring truth into the situation. You have to be courageous and you have to stand your ground and speak the truth, even if nobody believes you. Because someday God will raise up a second witness. And if they don't believe them, then God will judge them. But you did your part. And I'm not saying you should judge the person when you're witnessing, right? That's our tendency. If I see someone running out of a bank and there's a bank robbery, I'm going to assume they were the robber, right? That's the judgment. My witness, my testimony is, I saw this person at that time do this. That's our testimony. It's very factual. We don't have to have our assumptions added to it. You did this to me, and this is what it did to me. Facts. Didn't say why you did it. Somebody smacked me in the back of the head. I could say, you're just wanting to hit me, when really there was like a spider on my head. I'm saying, we have to ask. This person hit me in the back of the head at this time. Right? So that should be our testimony. We don't need to add to it, because now we're a judge instead of a witness. So when we bring this to somebody, a lot of times they're going to say, you're judging me, you're accusing me. I'm telling you what you did. If I am wrong, then correct me, but hear me, right? So they'll silence you. They'll get you out of the way. And they'll do this by any number of methods. Do it anyway. But be prepared for that. Be prepared to be silenced. Do it anyway. Do it anyway. Because that is how we fight the lies in this world. If we do not testify, they will continue. Is that what you want for your brothers and sisters? Now, I'm going to go and say something I wanted to say for a long time about people spreading gossip. Because a lot of times you'll hear something and think it's true, and then you got to protect that person, but you've never actually seen them do any of these things, right? Or it's all hearsay. And I see this a lot with the conspiracy theorists, right? They'll watch something on YouTube and they'll go start spreading it like it's the gospel truth. Don't do that. Because then you could actually be perpetuating a lie, but worse than that, just something a little shy of the truth, right? Because a lot of times conspiracies, there's a little bit of truth in them. And so if you don't really know what you're talking about, you can actually be making it worse, because you're making the truth less believable, because you're making a what do you call it? A reputation that particular story is false, because people know that this other part of it's false. So unless you know it, don't do that, because that's going to make it worse. And in order to make that more credible, start encouraging actual witnesses by not treating them like the enemy, right? If you don't believe what they say, or if somebody tells you something and they're your first witness, you don't have to treat them like the enemy. You don't have to. If you don't like what they have to say, don't treat them like the enemy. They still had a lot of courage to speak something knowing that you probably wouldn't believe them. And when you do that, you silence people for the enemy, because then people who really do have testimony about a certain topic won't come forward because of what you've treated the first witness. So you're working for the devil, period. End of story. I know you don't mean to, but that is what you're doing. You don't have to believe somebody. You can reserve judgment. I like using that word, reserve judgment. You're supposed to have two. You're supposed to have two witnesses. So reserve judgment. Say, you know what? I haven't seen that, but thank you for telling me this. I know that was hard for you to do. You could do that. But instead, what you end up doing, and I say you broadly because I've done it too. What most of the time happens is this attack, this muddying the water, because you don't like what they have to say. Reserve judgment. Anyone who's speaking the truth is not going to mind that. They're not. They just don't want to be treated like the villain when they've been the victim. And it hurts me so much. It hurts me so much. I don't care if you don't believe me. I don't. But you could hear me. That's all I ask for anybody. If someone tells you something difficult, just hear them. And don't judge true or false until you have more information. I was just speaking to somebody about somebody they knew who had been, this is somebody, I've never met this person, okay, at all. So I have no real connection to this, but they were struggling with processing this, but they had been accused. The person that they knew's husband had been accused of molesting a child. And I said, look, you have to wait, right? Because when it's something like that, you're really quick to judge the person. And sometimes it's not entirely what you think it is. And so this is what frustrates me. They're quick to assume the worst about the person when it fits their narrative, right? But a lot of times it's not what you think it is. And I've seen the other parent put a child up to saying these things when really the other parents do. I mean, heinous, horrible things. You still have to reserve judgment, even when your impulse is protection. Reserve judgment. Okay, protect the person, deal with it, but do it right. And that's a really hard one. It's a really hard one, and so they ended up, I think, like, I don't know the rest of that story. I'm just using that as an example. We're so quick to judge that somebody is guilty or that somebody is innocent based on our desires for what truth is, instead of actually seeking the truth. So the Torah has it all outlined, right? Jesus broke it down because, see, I'm sure that at this time people were using the commandment that is in, I don't remember the verse, but it's in the Old Testament, and I don't remember. It's in the Torah, where an allegation has to have two witnesses. I have no doubt that people have been using that to abuse people for years. For years. Cults are doing it right now. They're abusing children. Well, they're not allowed to say anything because there was only one witness. Wow. But if you do things the way Jesus outlined, you bring it to them, bring a second witness, then bring it to the congregation. If people don't believe you, you should still tell them what's happening. Don't be gaslit and intimidated into staying silent because you don't have somebody that witnessed it. God will provide that second witness, even if it takes years. Do it anyway. Do it anyway.